Imagine selling a dream so convincing that people emptied their life savings to buy it. Imagine building an empire worth hundreds of millions on nothing but words, charisma, and pure, unapologetic greed. Now imagine doing it all before you turn 30. Jordan Belfort wasn't born rich. He didn't inherit wealth or connections. He was a kid from Queens who learned that the most valuable skill in the world isn't creating something real. It's making people believe in something that is. By his mid-20s, he'd built a brokerage firm that made him $20 million a year. He owned mansions, yachts, helicopters, and a private island. He lived like a king, partied like a rock star, and operated like a criminal mastermind. And for nearly a decade, he got away with it. This is the story of the greatest salesman who ever lived, and how he sold himself, his friends, and thousands of innocent people straight into destruction. This is the rise and fall of Jordan Belfort, the Wolf of Wall Street. Queens, New York, early 1980s. Jordan Belfort was 20 years old, recently married, and selling Italian ices and meat door-to-door in Long Island. Not exactly glamorous work, but Jordan discovered something important during those sweaty summer days knocking on strangers' doors. He could sell anything to anyone. It wasn't about the product. The meat wasn't special. The Italian ices weren't unique. What made Jordan successful was Jordan himself, his smile, his energy. His ability to make you feel like buying from him was the best decision you'd ever make. He'd knock on your door with this infectious enthusiasm, compliment your home, ask about your family, make you laugh. And before you knew it, you'd bought $200 worth of meat you didn't need from a kid you'd met 5 minutes ago. Jordan realized something profound. People don't buy products. They buy feelings. They buy the person. They buy the story. And if you could control the story, you could control everything. By the mid-1980s, Jordan had moved beyond meat sales. He wanted something bigger, something that matched his ambition. So he talked his way into Wall Street, getting hired as a trainee stockbroker at a firm called L.F. Rothschild. This was it. This was the dream. Jordan was making legitimate money, learning the business, surrounded by wealthy men in expensive suits making fortunes. He studied everything: how to read clients, how to pitch stocks, how to close deals. He was a natural. His mentor at the firm pulled him aside one day and gave him advice that would shape everything that followed. The name of the game is, move the money from your client's pocket into your pocket. That's it. We don't create anything. We don't build anything. We're middlemen. And the best middlemen know that the client doesn't need to make money, you do. Jordan absorbed this cynical wisdom like gospel. Then came October 19, 1987, Black Monday. The stock market crashed. L.F. Rothschild collapsed. Jordan was fired along with everyone else. At 25 years old, his Wall Street dream was over before it really began. But Jordan wasn't the type to give up. He was angry, yes. Humiliated, definitely. But more than anything, he was determined. If the traditional Wall Street wouldn't give him what he wanted, he'd build his own version. He found a small brokerage firm in Long Island that was on the verge of bankruptcy. The firm dealt in penny stocks, cheap, worthless shares in tiny companies that legitimate brokers wouldn't touch. The commissions were huge because the stocks were essentially worthless, but if you could convince people to buy them, you'd make a fortune. Jordan saw an opportunity. He took over the firm, renamed it Stratton Oakmont, and began recruiting. But he wasn't looking for experienced Wall Street professionals. He wanted hungry kids from working-class neighborhoods, kids with no options, kids who'd do anything for money. He set up shop in a strip mall office in Long Island and started training his army. Jordan's sales training was unlike anything anyone had seen before. He didn't teach his brokers about stocks or markets or financial analysis. He taught them psychology, manipulation, how to control a conversation, how to create urgency, how to make someone believe they were about to miss the opportunity of a lifetime. He created what he called the straight line system, a sales technique designed to take control of every conversation and lead the client exactly where you wanted them to go. From the moment you picked up the phone, you had one goal: close the deal. The script was aggressive, relentless. You'd call someone cold, introduce yourself with absolute confidence, and immediately start pitching a stock. You create scarcity. This opportunity won't last, and social proof. All my other clients are buying this. You'd handle objections not by answering questions, but by bulldozing through them with more enthusiasm, more promises, more pressure. And if the client still hesitated, you'd mock them, question their intelligence, make them feel like idiots for not seeing what was so obvious to everyone else. It was psychological warfare disguised as financial advice. The young brokers Jordan hired, many still in their early 20s, became disciples. Jordan wasn't just their boss, he was their guru, their idol, the living embodiment of everything they wanted to be. He'd stand on his desk, literally on top of his desk, and give motivational speeches that would whip the office into a frenzy. He'd wave cash in the air. He'd scream about how they were warriors, how they were going to war every day against the rich people who thought they were better, how they were going to take everything those rich people had. The office became a cult, and Jordan was its charismatic leader. By the early 1990s, Stratton Oakmont had hundreds of brokers making thousands of calls a day. The office was chaos, phones ringing constantly, brokers screaming at clients, money flowing in impossible amounts. Jordan's personal income reached $20 million a year, $20 million, before he was 30 years old. He bought a massive estate in Long Island, then another in the Hamptons. He bought a Ferrari, then a Lamborghini, then multiple Ferraris and Lamborghinis. He bought a helicopter to commute between his homes. He bought a 167-foot yacht that had once belonged to Coco Chanel and named it the Nadine after his second wife. The parties at Stratton Oakmont became legendary. Midget-tossing competitions in the office. Prostitutes hired to entertain the top brokers. Drug use, cocaine, quaaludes, whatever kept the energy high and the sales going. Jordan would show up to the office in a chauffeur-driven Rolls-Royce, walk through the trading floor like an emperor greeting his subjects, then disappear into his office to do drugs with his inner circle. It was complete insanity, and it was making everyone involved incredibly rich. But here's the thing about Stratton Oakmont's success. It was built entirely on lies. The stocks they were selling, worthless. The companies were shells with no real business, no real products, no real future. Jordan and his partners would take a penny stock trading for 10 cents, buy up massive quantities, then use their army of brokers to create artificial demand. They'd call thousands of investors, pitch the stock aggressively, drive the price up through sheer volume of buying. Once the price was high enough, Jordan and the insiders would sell all their shares, making millions. The stock would then crash back to nothing, and all those investors who'd bought on the recommendation of Stratton Oakmont brokers would lose everything. It's called pump and dump, and it's completely illegal. But Jordan had a strategy for avoiding consequences. He used offshore accounts in Swiss banks to hide the money. He bribed accountants and lawyers to create complex corporate structures that obscured ownership. He paid off corrupt officials to look the other way. And most importantly, he created a culture of absolute loyalty among his brokers. You didn't talk to outsiders. You didn't question Jordan. You enjoyed the money and kept your mouth shut. For years, it worked perfectly. Jordan's lifestyle became even more excessive. The drugs got heavier. The parties got wilder. His behavior got more reckless. There's a famous story, later depicted in the movie, where Jordan, completely high on quaaludes, tried to drive home and ended up crawling to his car because he literally couldn't walk. He somehow drove barely without killing anyone, and later found out he'd caused multiple accidents and didn't even remember it. His wife Nadine begged him to slow down. His parents warned him he was out of control. His lawyer kept telling him the FBI was asking questions. Jordan didn't care. He felt invincible. He built an empire from nothing. He was smarter than everyone else, richer than everyone else, more successful than everyone else. How could anyone touch him? But someone was watching, very carefully. The FBI had opened an investigation into Stratton Oakmont in the early 1990s. They'd received complaints from investors who'd lost money. They'd noticed suspicious patterns of stocks that would suddenly spike in price, then crash just as quickly. They'd heard rumors about the wild parties, the drug use, the prostitutes, the money laundering. Agent Gregory Coleman was assigned to the case, and he became obsessed with taking Jordan down. Coleman started building his case methodically. He interviewed former Stratton brokers who'd been fired or left the firm. He analyzed trading patterns. He followed the money through layers of offshore accounts and shell companies. He tapped phones. He planted informants. And slowly, he started to see the full scope of what Jordan had built. This wasn't just securities fraud. This was a massive criminal enterprise that had defrauded thousands of people out of hundreds of millions of dollars. But here, the problem. Jordan's operation was sophisticated. The money was hidden. The corporate structures were complex. Everyone involved was either making too much money to cooperate or too scared of Jordan to talk. Coleman needed someone on the inside to flip. Someone close enough to Jordan to know everything, but desperate enough to betray him. That someone turned out to be Jordan's childhood friend, Danny Porosh. Danny had been with Jordan from the beginning. He was a partner in Stratton Oakmont, one of Jordan's closest confidants. But Danny had gotten greedy in his own way, running side schemes that even Jordan didn't know about. And when the FBI arrested him on unrelated charges, they offered him a deal. Testify against Jordan. Give us everything you know about Stratton Oakmont, and we'll go easy on your sentencing. Danny hesitated. This was his best friend, his partner, the man who'd made him rich beyond his wildest dreams. But Danny also knew what Jordan was capable of. He'd seen Jordan destroy people who crossed him, fire them, sue them, ruin them. And Danny knew that if Jordan ever found out about Danny's side schemes, he'd do the same to him. Self-preservation won. Danny agreed to cooperate. With Danny's testimony and documentation, the FBI finally had what they needed. They obtained warrants to freeze Stratton Oakmont's accounts. They raided the office. They seized records. Jordan's empire began collapsing. In a desperate move, Jordan tried to move money offshore. He flew to Geneva with a briefcase full of cash, trying to deposit it in his Swiss accounts. But Swiss authorities, under pressure from the FBI, were no longer willing to protect him. He fled to his yacht, the Nadine, sailing into international waters to figure out his next move. Then came the storm. In June 1996, Jordan's yacht was caught in a massive storm off the coast of Sardinia. Waves crashed over the deck. The boat was taking on water. The crew was screaming. Jordan, high on drugs as usual, barely comprehended what was happening. The Italian Navy had to rescue them. The yacht, his pride and joy, the symbol of everything he'd achieved, sank to the bottom of the Mediterranean. It was almost too perfect a metaphor. Jordan's empire, like his yacht, was going down. In 1998, Jordan Belfort was indicted on securities fraud and money laundering charges. He faced 20 years in federal prison. His lawyers told him he had one option: cooperate, become a government witness. Give them everyone, his partners, his brokers, the corrupt officials he'd bribed, everyone who'd helped him build Stratton Oakmont. Jordan, the man who'd preached loyalty, who'd built a cult of absolute devotion, who'd promised his brokers they were family, betrayed all of them. He wore a wire. He recorded conversations. He testified in court against his former friends and colleagues. He gave the FBI everything they wanted. In exchange, his sentence was reduced to 22 months. He served less than 2 years in a minimum security federal prison that felt more like a resort than punishment. While Jordan was in prison, he met a man named Tommy Chong, yes, that Tommy Chong from Cheech and Chong, who was serving time for selling drug paraphernalia. Chong told Jordan he should write a book about his experiences. Jordan did exactly that. He wrote his memoir, called it The Wolf of Wall Street, and sold it for a substantial amount. After his release, he reinvented himself as a motivational speaker, traveling the world teaching sales techniques to corporations and entrepreneurs. The same manipulation tactics he'd used to defraud investors, he now sold as legitimate business strategies, and people paid thousands of dollars to learn from him. In 2013, Martin Scorsese directed a film based on Jordan's book, starring Leonardo DiCaprio as Jordan. The movie was a massive hit, making hundreds of millions of dollars and earning multiple Oscar nominations. Jordan became famous all over again, not as a criminal but as a celebrity, an anti-hero, a cautionary tale that somehow made him more appealing, not less. Today, Jordan Belfort is still giving speeches, still selling, still living well. He's supposed to be paying restitution to his victims over $100 million he owes, but as of now, he's paid back less than 10% of that amount. The investors who lost their life savings because they trusted Stratton Oakmont brokers, most of them got pennies on the dollar, if anything at all. Jordan Belfort stole hundreds of millions of dollars, betrayed everyone who trusted him, served less than 2 years in prison, and came out the other side as a motivational guru, earning millions again. So what's the lesson here? Jordan's story reveals something uncomfortable about our world. We claim to hate con artists and criminals, but we're also fascinated by them. We make them famous. We turn their stories into entertainment. We pay them to teach us their secrets. Jordan Belfort proved that the greatest skill isn't creating value, it's creating the illusion of value. Not building something real, but making people believe in something that is. He was a salesman, the best salesman, and what he sold more than anything else was himself. He sold the dream of wealth without work, success without sacrifice, the idea that anyone could get rich if they just wanted it badly enough and were willing to bend the rules. And even after everything, the fraud, the arrests, the betrayals, the lives he ruined, people still want to believe that dream. Because Jordan Belfort understood something fundamental about human nature. We don't want the truth. We want the story. We want someone charismatic and confident to tell us that we can have everything we want. And as long as people want to believe that story, there will always be someone like Jordan Belfort ready to sell it to them. Pause. Jordan Belfort got away with it. Not completely, but more than he should have. He's living proof that in America, if you're charming enough, if you can sell yourself well enough, you can commit massive fraud, destroy thousands of lives, and still come out ahead. The Wolf of Wall Street isn't a cautionary tale. It's a blueprint, and that might be the most disturbing part of all. If you want more stories about the brilliant criminals who exploited the system and got away with it, subscribe and let me know what story you want to hear next. Until then, remember, the most dangerous lies are the ones we want to believe.